Hi everyone, welcome to Deep Geek Live. Apologies for last week if you were hoping to have an Deep Geek Live and it wasn't there. I took a week off. It was this year has been hard on all of us, and I thought, you know what, I'm just going to take a little bit of time off, recharge my energies, and I am back and very excited to be getting back into this. I've chosen a subject today that's something that I really enjoy talking about. I have to say, it's one of those subjects that everyone keeps on coming back to. Is there something going on we don't truly understand? And that's about the Maesters. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. The Maesters as a whole. Where are they coming from? What are they trying to achieve? And before we start, just wanted to say thank you to Ryan Larkin and also Ariel Winchester. Thank you so much for the super stickers. I very much appreciate that. But let's make sure we're all on the kind of the same page with where the Maesters are. So the Maesters as a whole and the Citadel are old. They are ancient. They have been around for a long time in Westeros, and they are very much a Westerosi thing. They don't exist over in Essos or anything like that. They started out around about the same time as so many of these other huge things happening in Westeros, like the Wall, like the High Tower, and so on. They started out with Paramore the Twisted, this High Tower son who wanted to get knowledge. He loved knowledge, and so he invited lots of people to come to Old Town, which was where the High Towers were, and they set up, and he died quite young, unfortunately, but in his memory as much as anything else, they set up the Citadel for all of these people who had knowledge. And this wasn't at that point a sort of an order of people. It was just a whole load of people who knew about healing, a bit about magic, and a little bit about history, and a little bit about science, and all the rest of it. And they were granted some land in Old Town that turned into the Citadel. This was thousands of years ago, and over time, the concept of the Maesters grew and developed out of that. So we have this order of Maesters that has been around for thousands of years, and slowly but surely infiltrated themselves into Westerosi life to the extent where we're at now. Every major house has got a Maester as part of what they are, teaching their children how to read and write, in charge of the messenger service, the Ravens, deciding when seasons change. All of these things come from the Citadel. The Maesters are in charge of the knowledge of what is going on there. Now, I'm sure we're going to get questions on this coming up, but they have been keeping a tight hold of all of this knowledge for a very, very long time. So they are to be admired for having the knowledge, but also they seem to be holding it back from most people. So that's where we're at. As always, I'm going to frame this live stream around questions I've had from my patrons. That's one of the benefits of being a patron, is you get to have a question or two here. I will always prioritize my the questions I get from my patrons. And also, just before I get onto those, Maralee saying, just a show of love and appreciation for all the fabulous content and stories on both channels. My other channel is called The Well Told Tale, especially the latest story, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. Any update on new merch like Kraken Taco t-shirts? So this is a rare moment, guys, because I have probably for the first time remembered merch. So big things happening in the course of the next week. I will announce it on Twitter, and then here next week there will be an Deep Geek website launching very, very soon. And on that website, I'm going to have a little bit of extra merch going on. So not just the Deep Geek stuff, but also, as you can see, again, Kraken tacos, mugs, and t-shirts will be available. Also, a few other bonus things. If you do appreciate the stories on the Well-Told Tale, but you don't want to just listen to them broken down into segments, as I do at the moment for podcasts, but you want to listen to the whole story, then I will also be releasing on the website as MP3s some of the stories. I've done things like I can't remember the time machine. I'm going to stitch it all together. So that's what's going on. Please do check that out when I launch it. That's kind of like a little bit of a preview there. Thank you so much to Marvin Martin saying Citadel Hightower has black oily stone where this conspiracy just happens to be. Coincidence or not? Right. So the history of the Maesters is definitely linked in with the history of Old Town and linked in with the history of the Hightowers. So the Hightowers are, as you would expect, linked to the High Tower. They are the ruling lords in Old Town, and the High Tower, which is built there on an island, Battle Isle. Now, the base of that is this kind of black fused stone that we see in various other places across not just Westeros, but also Essos, which seems to have come from an ancient civilization, something we don't truly understand. The base is not just, and when I say the base is made of it, it's not just like a little bit of infrastructure. This was a settlement. There's passages, there's rooms. It's almost described as being almost like a maze in there. So this was an ancient settlement that has to be linked in with these other fused black oily stone structures that we see right across the world. Now, does that link across to the Maesters? Yes, but I would personally say that the Hightowers are actually separate to the Maesters. We shouldn't say that they're both exactly the same. They do have very similar aims and objectives, and there are strong links between them, and we'll try and unpick exactly what those links are, but they aren't the same. So the history of that place is not known to everyone. In fact, it's not known, it would appear, even to the Maesters. The stories we get from the Maesters do not seem to have that element of history. They arrived long, long after that. The Maesters did not exist, not only when that base for the High Tower was built, but also there were 4 attempts to build a tower on top of it before the final version, which was built. And then a little bit after that, the Maesters were founded. So this is a long time before them. And if there are some gaps in their knowledge, it is from before they even existed. So coincidence, I think on this instance, yes, it probably is. Other than to say that the reason they are where they are is because that is where the civilization was, and that is where they put in their roots. I had another question from Kelly Johnson saying, do you think Vagon joined the Maester Conspiracy? Right, so the Maester Conspiracy, and I put this as the thumbnail, so I should probably unpack this a little bit more. The idea that there is a Maester Conspiracy is one that the Game of Thrones community, the Song of Ice and Fire community, has been discussing for a long time. The idea that perhaps behind the scenes, the Maesters have been trying to influence events. Perhaps they influenced events hugely. Things like the Doom of Valyria or the Dance of the Dragons, things like that. Perhaps the Maesters are behind all this. Now, at a meta level, I think what I have to say is that that's entirely possible, but the Maesters clearly have not been running the whole show all the time, because not everything has gone their way. The Targaryens coming in and taking over was not, it would appear, part of the plan. The ongoing prevalence of magic, it would appear, is not part of the plan. So the Maesters, even if there is a Maester Conspiracy, which we will unpick, even if there is, it has not been 100% successful. So I think that's what I would sort of put as the starting point for all of this. Question from Bride of Fire. Hi, Robert. I hope you enjoyed your time off. I did. Thank you very much. We know that Marwyn accuses the Maesters of killing off the dragons. Do you think this knowledge is still currently at the Citadel, where Euron and or Sam and or Jaqen could find it? Or do you think Marwyn took the knowledge with him east? Also, what do you think could be going on that Marwyn is working with a faceless man? Okay, so the knowledge of how to kill the dragons is based upon a few things. So there is a book called The Death of Dragons that Tyrion has vaguely heard of, that appears to be driving people to the Citadel, this idea that maybe there's this knowledge of how to kill dragons in the Citadel. Now, is it staying there? Well, this knowledge is probably in these kind of locked vaults, if it exists. It's probably in the locked vaults, and they're not going to let the knowledge, not going to let people just steal books and run away with it. Is Marwyn going to take it with him? Well, he may well know, but is he going to go away with this book? No. So Marwyn has already gone. At the end of the story that we have right now, he's heading off to Daenerys. He is magic-y. He loves magic. He is not going to be trying to kill the dragons. If anything, he is wanting to promote the dragons. So I don't think he is going away with some kind of agenda to go and kill dragons. So there might, however, in the vaults be this secret book, this long buried book about how to kill dragons. Connected to this, Anime Lover Nicole says, do you think that the Maesters killed the last dragons during Aegon III's reign? I've been re-listening to Fire and Blood. I'm almost all the way through it now. Incidentally, listening to Fire and Blood is a very different, or any book is very different to reading it. You get a lot of different emphases as you go through it. I've been listening particularly intently for any hints that the Maesters were involved in the Dance of the Dragons, or anything, or killing off the dragons, or anything like that. I have to say, so far, I've still got a few hours to go. I'm still partway through Aegon III's reign. So far, I've not spotted any hints of it. So one could argue that that's probably to be expected. Fire and Blood and also The World of Ice and Fire are histories written by the Maesters, so of course the Maesters would not include information about how they brought about the end of the dragons and all the rest of it. My general take is that the Dance of the Dragons itself was probably not caused by the Maesters. That, I mean, they may have prompted it, they may have encouraged it and all the rest of it, but it probably wasn't directly them. Certainly, once it happened, they were not directing events. That was all about the personalities involved, and they were not responsible for the deaths of all of the dragons that happened there. That was dragons fighting dragons and all the rest of it. So I don't think that the Maesters started the Dance of the Dragons in order to kill the dragons. However, the question you ask, I think, is a really insightful one, saying, did they kill the last dragons? So at the end of the Dance of the Dragons, what we're left with is just 3 or 4 baby dragons, really. There was not much going on. And suddenly the Maesters, if they wished to stop the dragons from just taking over again, that was their moment. And I think that it was a very good chance that, yes, they then, for want of a better word, poisoned the dragons that were there, the baby dragons, and prevented the Targaryens from having the dragons that they had. Now, before the Dance of the Dragons, you have to remember that the Targaryens and the dragons, they were multiplying like crazy. There was like, I don't know, 20-something dragons at the time. The number of Targaryens was huge, and there was every indication that at that point they could have just increased exponentially. The dragon eggs were hatching all the time over on Dragonstone. So that clearly was a tipping point. If the Dance of the Dragons hadn't happened, then Westeros would have just had dragons absolutely everywhere because there were so many of them. So the Maesters, if we accept, and I think we do have to accept, that the Maesters are against magic, they are pro-science and enlightenment and all the rest of it, then yes, it is in their interest to get rid of the dragons. And they would not have been able to do that while there were so many massive dragons going around. But when there were just 3 or 4 small dragons, suddenly they did have a chance. And so that is a possibility. Maybe next week, having finished off Fire and Blood, I may well have a little bit more insight in this, but I've not seen any evidence, but I don't think we would expect to see any evidence. Marvin Martin asking, do Maesters really hate magic or just want to whittle it down to something they can control for their own ends? So they want a world in which science and rationality are in charge. Now, that means getting rid of all of these things that they cannot control. They want to be able to control knowledge and understanding and all the rest of it. Dragons are they're outside of their control, so that is where they're about. Now, are they wanting to get rid of magic? Well, if they could control and analyze and just sort of break magic down into something that they could understand, I think that would be absolutely fine. But as it is, they cannot. Magic is something out of their control. So I think that they would be very happy to get rid of it. Is that, I think that's where it is. It's not that they hate magic per se. I think they just want to get rid of things that are outside of their control. Kelly Johnson asking if a maester or a flunky led the storming of the Dragon Pit. The storming of the Dragon Pit was done by the shepherd, who was a follower of the Faith of the Seven. Now, that and the Faith of the Seven is also, or was also, based in Old Town, had links across to House Hightower. So yes, there are clear links across between the Faith and the Maesters. But I think that the situation you had there, this is digging deep into the sort of the world that we had during the Dance of the Dragons. The situation that was there was that Rhaenyra was in control of King's Landing, and she gets wiped out by the history books as a queen, but she was queen. So she had no money, and because the previous regime, Aegon II's regime, they'd taken the money out from King's Landing, basically. So she had no money there, and so she had to raise taxes, and frankly, they lost control of the city. So this was one of the things that was going on, was that the people rebelled against the idea not just of her as the queen, but also as the Targaryens as a whole. Now, that seems absolutely understandable, and it doesn't seem to me to be a Maester Conspiracy. That's just my general take on that. If anything, it would be a Faith of the Seven conspiracy, but no. Just dipping into the chat, people asking about whether Quentin is alive or dead. I did a video on this quite recently. The fact is, we're told by some very creditable witnesses that he is dead, by Missandei and by Sir Barristan. So the point of Quentin's, I always spoil my own videos here, but the point of Quentin's life and story is actually the point of his death. George R. R. Martin does this. It's quite callous in a way, but he introduced us to this character not because the character himself was going to be important, but because his death was going to be important. And his death was going to achieve, I can't remember what I said, but off the top of my head, two very clear things. Thing number one, his death was the thing which released the dragons, which is going to be absolutely pivotal. That was necessary. And secondly, his death was going to be the thing which prompts Doran Martell to decide not to side with Daenerys, but instead to side with Aegon VI. Sir Barristan has said he's going to send the bones back to Doran Martell, and Doran Martell is going to get the bones back and then hear not just that Quentin was killed by the dragons, but he's going to hear that Daenerys has now disappeared. Daenerys rejected the offer of an alliance with Dorne, and that's going to happen at exactly the same time that Arianne says, hey, you know what? This Aegon character, he's launched an invasion and it's going really well. And that is going to push Doran and Dawn into Aegon's camp. So it's heartless, but George R. R. Martin with his characters is heartless. But the point of the whole Quentin Martell thing is not that Quentin Martell has got this great hero arc. He's not a great hero. The point of his story is his death, and his death is leading to really important plot points. We saw him die, and we saw him die through characters that we trust, like Missandei. Marvin Martin saying, why not poison dragons and Targaryens during the conquest when there were just three? That's a really good point. So there were, when the Targaryens started, there were just three dragons. My personal guess is that they were three massive dragons at the time. They were, Balerion the Black Dead was huge. So poisoning them probably wasn't as easy. Getting to them probably wasn't as easy. And also, they probably didn't have, the Maesters probably didn't have as much information. When the dance ended, you're a good 130 odd years or 120 odd years later, they've had a long time to study the dragons, understand what was going on. So that's the big difference. They're much bigger compared to after the dance, very small dragons, and they've had a lot longer to study them and understand how that all works. Asma K, thank you so much for the super sticker. I really appreciate that. And also Mara Lee, thank you so much for the super sticker. That's very generous. Mara, I saw your super chat from earlier. I will get to your questions over on Patreon in a little bit too. Nicole Stewart saying, can you talk about Lady Barbie Dustin's distrust of the Maesters and whether she was right to distrust them? Okay, so Barbie Dustin is a fantastic character. She's a book-only character, but she's great. So she is the widow of one of the guys, Lord Dustin, who went with Ned Stark down to the Tower of Joy and died. And Ned Stark brings back not his bones, but his horse. And Barbie Dustin is not very impressed by this, particularly given that Ned brought back the bones of his sister, but couldn't be bothered to bring back the bones of her husband. Barbie Dustin, therefore, has a grudge against Ned Stark that lasts a couple of decades, all the way through to the point of the story where we're at. She then makes an appearance at Winterfell, when she kind of interacts a lot with Theon, knowing that Theon understands Winterfell. He's lived there for a long time, whereas the others who have come in, the Boltons and the Freys, they don't understand it so well. So she interacts a lot with him, and she lets off a lot of information. She gives us a lot of background, and in particular with the Maesters, she blames them firstly for the Southron ambitions of Ned Stark's father, which she basically she blames a lot of what went wrong in her life on the Maesters pushing the Starks to get involved down the south, because she was in love with Ned's older brother, Baden Stark, who then got betrothed to Catelyn Tully, as she was at the time. Barbie Dustin obviously didn't want him to be marrying someone else, but the Southron ambitions meant that actually the House Tully were a better match than House. She wasn't a Dustin at the time; she was a Ricewell, I think, and so she's got a bit of a grudge against them. But then she goes on to make a whole load of actually very valid points, which is that who actually are the Maesters? How convenient is it that they don't have surnames? They give up their surnames when they become Maesters. They just have a first name, so you don't know where they've come from. You don't know what their affiliations might be, and added to which, they read all the mail. It's not just that they're the post office and they're just passing on the mail without reading it. They write it often, and then they receive it and they read it, and then they pass it on. So they know absolutely everything that is going on. And she sees them as being this great kind of conspiracy operating behind everything that's going on in Westeros. So she clearly has a point. She also clearly comes from a very biased perspective. Should she distrust them? Probably. But the idea that they are in charge of absolutely everything, I think, is overstating the mark. I don't think that all of the individual Maesters absolutely everywhere are in on this. We'll get to this a little bit. But I don't think every single Maester is in on what is going on. What we have are just the cabal at the center of the Citadel, and that, I think, is what we need to be focusing in on as a sort of a home for this conspiracy. Conan Song saying, wait, I just realized Daenerys doesn't have a maester as Queen of Meereen. She does not, but this is where Marwyn comes in. Marwyn has headed off in order to become her maester. That's how that whole thing links up. So the Meereen, slight digression, but the Meereen has got a whole load of people suddenly coming there, and this is one of the things George R. R. Martin called it the Meereenese knot. This was not this book, but the last book, what slowed him down for a very long time was trying to work out the iteration, the order of people arriving at Meereen, because he knew there were a lot of people who were going to be arriving at Meereen. You have people like Quentin that we know about. We have Moqorro, we have Victarion, we have Tyrion. We've got Jorah returning, and we've got Marwyn. All of these people arriving, and they all had to arrive in the right order for the story. And that was what George R. R. Martin was talking about, the Meereenese, not just trying to unpick it all and work out exactly what order everyone has to arrive in. But Marwyn, probably one of the last of those to arrive, he has gone there in order to be her maester. So Daenerys is going to, when she returns back to Meereen, before she heads off, she is going to assemble the equivalent of a small council, which will include a maester. So that is the role that Marwyn is going to be taking up. Ariel Winchester saying, hey Robert, I was able to get caught up on a bunch of live streams I've missed because of school. I'm pleased. My question is, do you think that the Maesters have the secret to defeating the others locked away and don't even realize it? How do you think they'll react once it reaches the Citadel that the others are real and are moving towards destroying Westeros? From previous videos, I understand they are pretty anti-magic, and it's hard to deny that the others are anything other than magical. Yes, so they are anti-magic, and just to sort of establish this, it's not just that they tell the Maesters, magic's not real, it doesn't exist, or whatever. It is a key part of becoming a Maester. They have this night in a dark cell where there are 4 of the dragon glass candles, and they're basically challenged to light them, and they can only be lit by magic. And the whole point of that exercise is to show them that magic does not work. It does not exist anymore. The Maesters do not ever claim that magic never existed or magic is not a part of the world. The argument they seem to be putting forward is that magic is no longer a part of the world. Magic is not how the world operates now at a basic level. That's the thing that we see from people like Maester Luwin, who's talking, when he talks a lot to Bran, he talks about, mayhaps once magic would do such and such and such and such, but now, no, it doesn't exist. That seems to be the position that they're taking, and it's not to deny it, it's to say that it did exist, but now it doesn't. Do they have the secret to defeating the others locked away and don't even realize it? Possibly part of it. I don't think that the deal with the Citadel is that they know all of the history of the Long Night. I don't think they do any more than anyone else does. They will have some bits of knowledge, and I suspect Sam will return with some bits of knowledge. I think that he will be able to sort of draw together this idea of what might be able to defeat the others based on legends, what might be able to defeat the others, Valyrian steel and all the rest of it. And I think that's the kind of knowledge he's going to be able to go back, not a specific like silver bullet of here is how to do it. The silver bullet, if it exists, seems to be connected in with the Children of the Forest, because the old story that we have from the First Men, that of the last hero, is that the last hero at humanity's darkest hour went off to try and find the Children of the Forest. He succeeded, and then that ended the long night. So the secret is with the children of the forest. So that is where we need to be going, rather than to ancient books and histories. In fact, I think that thematically we are going to get this difference that they tried to bring out actually in the show. You can decide for yourself whether they were successful in this, but this difference between lived history, experienced history, which is exemplified by the weirwood trees, we can be able to see through them, we can experience stuff again, and written history, which is what the Citadel and the Maesters are all about. And George R. R. Martin is trying to show this through what he has given us, which is two different types of writing in this world. It's all from a specific perspectives, but there's a written history, which we get in Fire and Blood and the World of Ice and Fire, and then there's the lived history, which we get through Dunk and Egg and A Song of Ice and Fire, people themselves experiencing things and all the rest of it. And I think what George R. R. Martin is trying to show is that the lived and experienced history may well be biased, but what is experienced is true. The written history may well be able to provide more context, but it is in and of itself biased and therefore missing a lot of the points of what's going on. So those are the kind of the two different perspectives that we've got going on there, which is a bit of a digression. Will they have the answer to how to defeat the others? I think it will be with the Children of the Forest rather than in the Citadel. Kraken Tacos, thank you for picking up a question from Joshua Herbert, saying, do you believe there is something like a coalition between the Citadel, the Faith, and House Hightower? Sort of. Whether it's a coalition is a different matter. I think it's more of an understanding between them. What House Hightower pays and supports both the Citadel and the Faith. What we see many times through history, we see it in Fire and Blood, we see it in the World of Ice and Fire, is that House Hightower have a big influence on who is in the powerful positions in both of those institutions. By which I mean that they often get to decide who is going to be the High Septon. They often get to decide who gets fast-tracked within the Citadel to Archmaesterdom and things like that. So it's not that there is this agreement which has lasted for thousands of years between them that they're going to do whatever for each other. It's this ongoing symbiotic relationship between the three of them that allows them all to understand that they do have shared interests. They have shared interests in keeping a stranglehold on power of knowledge and spirituality, but they don't each get to control the other. And so sometimes you'll see that the Faith rebels and the Hightowers have to sort of pull them back, or sometimes the Maesters are doing something that perhaps the Faith don't like, or it doesn't, they're not always just on the same side pulling in the same direction all of the time. They have links, and sometimes the links are very strong and sometimes the links are not so strong. Marvin Martin, thank you so much, saying science and reason seem great, but George R. R. Martin showing human nature can corrupt any system. Could the candle be used to find and kill those with magic to light the candle? Did Maesters encourage the Children of the Forest genocide? Okay, well, a few questions there. Can the candle be used to find and kill those with magic to light the candle? I think the idea is that the glass candle, the knowledge of how to use the glass candle is very limited within the Citadel now. The fact that they are using it as an example that magic, or a proof indeed that magic does not work, implies that they are very, very confident that nobody can use it. Now, could it be used to hunt down people who use magic? I mean, yes, it could be. But it seems much more likely that what we think has happened probably will happen, which is those who can use it steal it and use it for their own ideas. That's what happened with Maester Marwyn. We see that he has a glass candle there in his rooms that he seemed to be using to track Sam's voyage down from Braavos. That was the most likely explanation for how he knew that was when Sam was about to arrive and all the rest of it. So because he has been tracking him through this glass candle. I don't think the Maesters have got some kind of great idea all set up about how they are going to use the glass candle to find magicians and hunt them down and kill them. I don't think that's where we're at. Did they encourage the Children of the Forest genocide? So the Children of the Forest genocide, such as it was, happened before the Citadel was around. So the first men arrived, they moved up through Westeros, killing off the Children of the Forest. The pact happened, and after all of that seems to have been the establishment of the Citadel. So no is the short answer, that they weren't the people who were driving this in the first place. I think there was one more. Cam, thank you so much, saying, "Hi Robert, you are a balm for the soul right now." Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. That's very kind. Chase saying, "Haven't been a patron in a while due to being a poor student, but wanted to show some love. Been loving the live streams as always. Please keep it up." Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And I completely understand that not everyone can be a patron. So if you're a poor student, then that's very kind of you to super chat. Thank you. Kelly Johnson saying, Maesters anti-magic, but high towers use it. Yeah, I've got a question coming up on this in a little bit from my patrons, so if it's okay with you, I will pick up on that when I come to that with questions from my patrons. I think that's me caught up now on the chat. Let me take another question from my patrons, which is from Lee Roberts, which is actually what we've been talking about already, which is saying, "Hi Robert, hope all is well." It is, thank you. "What are your views on the connection between House Hightower and the Citadel? Are the Hightowers using the Maesters' reach across Westeros to push their own agendas and rule from the shadows?" And Howland's little sister saying, "I have the same train of thought and would like your opinion as to the extent of control over the Citadel by House Hightower. To have a conspiracy, you have to have at least two partners, the Hightowers and the Maesters. I see the Hightowers as using the Maesters as their own private source of information on the other houses of Westeros. What secrets are known to the Hightower family and the Grand Maesters that will be uncovered when the story continues?" Okay, so my take on the relationship between the two is that the Hightowers are the patrons of the Citadel, so they get a chance to drop in Hightowers into there. So younger sons regularly go into the Citadel and become Archmaesters. So there is a clear link across there. We see that several times, that the Hightowers who are in the Citadel do retain this kind of link across to their own family. And yes, there is some to and fro about knowledge of what's going on. I don't personally think that this extends to a mass conspiracy, to the extent that this is over thousands of years. Now, there can be conspiracies which last for decades, perhaps, but to have a conspiracy that lasted for hundreds of years, for thousands of years, I think that it's a lot more of an organic thing, this relationship between House Hightower and the Citadel. It's not that they have this one idea that they've been trying to go with all this time. I think it shifts and changes over time, with a strong basis that House Hightower are protecting the Citadel. And I think the Citadel are very aware of that. It's not just that they're bankrolling them, but that the walls protecting them are coming from House Hightower. So they all have an interest in ensuring that Old Town remains protected and important. Now, the Hightowers themselves, if you look back through their history, they have always, a couple of exceptions, but they've generally prioritized trade and negotiation and moving with the winds of politics rather than being aggressive and fighting and all the rest of it. When the Andals came, they were the first to really embrace them and just say, okay, fine, we'll marry into the Andals, and hey, why don't you set up your religion here? When the Targaryens came, they opened up the gates and said, you come in, and hey, while you're here, why don't we crown the king? The Hightowers have been absolutely bending to wherever they need to be in order to keep their position as the protectors of what was, for most of Westerosi history, the biggest, richest, most important city in all of Westeros. It's only in the last couple of centuries that King's Landing overtook it in importance. So we often underestimate the importance of House Hightower. For most of the history of Westeros, they were one of, if not the most important families in the entire continent. WKK Sort of the Morning, thank you so much for the super chat, saying, where do you get the haircut? Will Biden win? Who has the bigger impact in the end between the Maesters and the Septons? Where'd I get my haircut? Just down the road. Will Biden win? I don't do politics on this channel, but let's count all the votes and see who gets the most. If you watch this channel a lot, I suspect you know who I would like to win. Who has a bigger impact in the end between the Maesters and the Septons? I think they have slightly, I mean, they probably are aware of this, but they have slightly different realms of control. The Maesters have a lot more influence over the upper echelons, over the 1%. The Maesters have made sure that they are the people who are teaching and training the sons and daughters of the ruling class. That is what they have been focusing in on all of this time. That is where their influence lies. They're in charge of communication between the most important people and all the rest of it. They're in charge of advising the most important people. They're in charge of training and teaching the most important people. The Faith of the Seven, yes, they've got people up there at the top as well, but their main strength is at a very ground level with the people, with the normal people. They have septs in every little village across the entirety of Westeros, well, excepting the north and the Iron Islands and a bit of Dawn and all the rest of it, because they're just a little bit different. But the vast bulk of Westeros, every single village has got a sept. There's a septon there. There are wandering septons all over the place. There are septors. They are part of everyday life of the people. And so the two of them, it's not that there's a debate about who is the most influential. They are both hugely influential, but at slightly different segments of society. Rod Dammit saying, got to catch you live. Fantastic. I love it. And welcome if you are watching live for the first time. And thank you for appreciating the haircut. We're about to go back into lockdown, or we have just gone back into lockdown in this country. So I thought I'd get it cut just in time. So I just the last day I could do, I got it cut. question from Art Yokia saying, thank you, saying, was Jorah Mormont's marriage a plot by the Maesters and the Hightowers or just bad luck? Quentin is alive, change my mind. Okay, so Jorah Mormont, I don't think it was a plot. I don't think that the Mormonts are particularly important as far as the Maesters are concerned. The idea of having a high tower there on Bear Island, I don't think that gives them huge amounts of political influence. So no, I don't think that was a plot. Quentin is alive, changed my mind. I did cover this just a moment ago. Quentin, the evidence that Quentin is alive is, I mean, I don't even know what the evidence is, to be honest. I've looked at this a lot of times. It seems to be the fact that the narrative cut off just before we got a line from George R. R. Martin saying, and then he died. The fact is, that wasn't when he died. No one says that was when he died. He died a few days later, and we have Missandei and we have Sir Barristan, who both witnessed his death. If you believe that, this is a huge digression away from the Maesters. I will come back to the Maesters in just one moment. If you believe that Quentin is alive, what you have to believe is that he got burnt by a dragon breathing fire on him, and we know that that set him on flame, and we know that he will have had huge amounts of burns. You have to believe that, firstly, he survived that. Secondly, the witnesses to that happening, we have witnesses to that happening, decided not to tell anyone the fact that he survived that for no particular reason. The fact that he then somehow managed to find another body that was also char-grilled by a dragon, swap his costume for their costume, having just been burned by a dragon, and then that body must then, whoever that person is, must then lie in a bed and not say, you know what, I'm not who you say I am, or give any hint that they are not Quentin Martell for several days. The body, we know that a charred body that was taken from the dragons, that was burned by dragons, was looked after by Missandei for several days, and that person spoke several times. They never gave the game away. You have to believe all of those things, and then that Quentin, who, let's face it, is not the cleverest person, not the person who can think on his feet the most, went through all of that and then somehow escaped all of that out of a city that is currently under siege. And for what? For what purpose? Every single thing that motivates Quentin is serving his father, proving himself to his father. Just running away, there's nothing in his character to suggest that. So we have got witnesses to his death. We've got every single fact about the who the body was that died seems to be him. We've got all of the evidence about his character and who he was suggests that that was him who died, and there is literally zero evidence that he survived in any way, shape, or form. So that is my personal take on it. And as I said a little bit earlier in this live stream, the point of Quentin's life that George R. R. Martin was showing, or his story that George R. R. Martin was showing us, was his death. His death was hugely important. He was the reason the dragons escaped, and he will be the reason why Doran Martell will join. That is why it's not that it was a meaningless death. It was a very meaningful death that advanced the plot. So here endeth the lecture. I did have another question from Lord Corliss Whitefire, great name, saying, "Hey Robert, what are the chances Marwyn uses the glass candle to convince Dany to join the fight against the others by showing her they're real?" That's a really interesting question. So it's very clear that what happens with Maester Marwyn, Archmaester Marwyn, is heading off over to Dany. Now, he is going there with an idea to be her maester, and I suspect he will join up, and I suspect that she will allow him into her small council and all of the good things. He doesn't appear to have taken the glass candle with him. Maybe he's got another one, we don't know, but that doesn't seem to be the case as far as we're aware. So possibly is the answer. But as far as the plot is concerned, I think that Jon coming down to meet Daenerys and trying to persuade her of the truth of the others and all the rest of it, I think that is going to be quite plot important to get Jon and Daenerys together. So I don't personally think that Marwyn will be there and convince her of the truth of it before Jon gets there. That doesn't quite work for me. Reflective Rambling saying, for Ygritte Weirwood, can we talk about Maester Wallace? Yeah, of course we can. So Maester Wallace is this is one of those things when I was talking about the links across between the different houses of or between the High Towers and the Maesters, and this was one of the sort of the examples. So Maester Wallace allegedly is Wallace Flowers. He is a bastard-born High Tower who was the Archmaester who is there in the Archmaester of Ravenry. I think he is in the Citadel now. He is now very old. So I think in terms of talking about him, I think that his role in the story is largely coming to an end, to the extent that I think that it's just he's there in order to allow people to do things by being there but absent. And what I mean by that is that we get Pate, who is Jack and Hagar, and we get Sam, who are there effectively looking after him, and they will be allowed by the fact that they are there working for him in order to do the things that they need to do. So that, I think, is his purpose in the story. But yeah, it's another indication that the High Towers place their people into the story, into the Citadel, in order to advance their own agenda and to keep those links going. Sydney Rose, thank you so much for the super chat, saying, it's strange that the Maesters don't write and teach more about the unexplored. There's no Maester Fund or royal patent to go on expeditions. Is there an Africaros, Southaros in A Song of Ice and Fire? Yeah, so there is Sothorios, which is the southern continent. The Maesters, I would agree, tend to be quite insular in their understanding. They do go exploring, some of them do go exploring, looking for new knowledge. That seems to be a thing which is, if not actively encouraged, then certainly allowed. We get lots of stories. The Maesters went to Valyria before Valyria blew up. We get stories of Maesters who go up even beyond the wall. They go off in various places. So Maester Marwyn, Archmaester Marwyn, has gone off all over the place across in Essos. So Maesters do go traveling, and they bring back knowledge, and that knowledge is sort of banked. But it doesn't seem to have been one of the driving forces to go out and get more knowledge. It seems to be more of a driving force to keep hold of the knowledge that they already have. So, we have. So, in terms of travel, yes, there is Sartorius, which is the southern continent, but we don't have huge amounts of information about that one. And the Maesters do show a notable lack of interest in trying to. I mean, they have money; they could bankroll explorations to lots of different places, but the people who actually explore these areas more often than not seem to be people like Corlys Velaryon, who goes off on his great voyages. So it is interesting, but I think that gets to the heart of what their driving force is. It is not about the accumulation of new knowledge. It is about the keeping hold of the knowledge that they do already have. Question. Let's go back to questions from my patrons. Diego Godoy, hola, saying, could you remind us what we know about Marwyn the Mage? Is he a Maester? He's an Archmaester. Yes, indeed. How could he get so far away from their anti-magic traditions? Are there any hints he may be related by blood to Daenerys? Also, a humble suggestion, any chance we could have a live stream about swords in the Song of Ice and Fire world and their role in the end game? That sounds fascinating. Guys, if you're interested in swords as a live stream topic, what I'm looking to do now is I've looked at a few of the different religions. I'm trying to look at a few of the topics that sort of cross the piece over in the world of Ice and Fire. So the Maesters is definitely one. Swords would be a fantastic, or Valyrian steel. Let me know if you'd be interested in that. Is there any hint that Marwyn the Mage may be a Targaryen? I think actually the hints are that he isn't. He goes off in this small lecture to Sam about Maester Aemon, who was up at the wall, and says that, why wasn't he an Archmaester? He should have been an Archmaester. He was clearly very knowledgeable, very clever. The reason why was because he was a Targaryen, and they didn't trust him. So that seems to be Marwyn's view. If he were a Targaryen himself, then he probably would not hold that view that Targaryens aren't made Archmaesters because he's an Archmaester. So the hints are that he is not. He's just somebody who's fascinated by magic. How do they let him be so involved in magic? Well, they kind of sideline him, and it's almost as if he's allowed. This is part of the knowledge. As I say, the Maesters don't deny that magic did exist. They just deny that it's here now. So they accept the need for somebody to be an expert in that, but they don't seem to send many people to study it. So it's that I think it was something like 1 in 100 get their Valyrian steel link, which is the higher mysteries, the studying magic. So not many people actually study it anymore, and so it's almost as if they've said, you can carry on doing that, but you go off and live in this little bit over there, this small annex over there, and we're not going to send many students to you. So you can you and the thing you study can just wither away and die. So that seems to be what the overall approach is. When he dies, would they even carry on with it? Who knows? Now, obviously, the world has changed. Magic has returned. So it's a slightly different world. But yeah, that seems to have been what their approach, just let it wither and die. Question from Gus Mulder saying, is there a parallel between the Maesters and the Night's Watch? They both can't marry and have heirs. One order to fight fire, the other order to fight ice. What do you think? So there's clearly a thematic link here. Both of them, as you say, they are an order set apart. They make vows to give up all claims to inheritance and things like that. They give up the chance to have a wife. They can't be female. There's lots of links across between them, and they make very similar-ish vows in a way. Now, I think that's deliberate on George R. R. Martin's part in that both of them seem to have, to a degree, kind of missed the point. That seems to be what he's trying to show here, is that the Night's Watch they've been existing for thousands of years, and they've moved away from what they were originally supposed to be doing to actually just trying to defend against the wildlings, and that's not really the point of what they're there for. Similarly, the Maesters were there to be sort of studying and understanding and learning, but now they're just about keeping hold of knowledge rather than disseminating it. So again, they've kind of missed the point. There's another group that's got some similarities, which is the Kingsguard. Also, again, the same kinds of vows and all the rest of it. So, yes, there are links and similarities. That you're wondering whether there's an ice and fire thing going on here, where the Night's Watch are fighting against fire, and against ice being the others, and then the Maesters against fire as the dragons. Possibly, but I don't think that's particularly why they were set up. Yes, that was why the Night's Watch was set up, but not why the Citadel and the Maesters were set up. I think that the opposition to dragons came a lot later on in that process. Archiokia saying, what about the dance over Shipbreaker Bay and the Maester reading to illiterate Baratheon Lord? Yeah, so the Maesters, I'm not entirely sure what point you're sort of trying to there suggest that perhaps they were involved in the Dance of the Dragons. The Maesters have clearly got this power over a lot of the lords and ladies of Westeros, in that they can read, and a lot of them actually can't. It's still noted, again, as I say, going through Fire and Blood, when some people are sort of like sent off as a sort of a letter of something remarkable about them, is the fact that they can read and write. Not all of the lords and ladies can. So that means that the Maesters get a chance to control the information that goes to everyone. Now, in terms of trying to work out whether the Maesters had some role in the Dance of the Dragons, what I wasn't trying to do when I was rereading it was to understand what information we were being given, so much as trying to see whether or not the Maesters were in some way responsible for prompting people to be taking certain actions. Now, within the actual dance, as I say, once it got underway, then that was purely, this was different personalities clashing and all the rest of it. That wasn't a Maester thing. That was the fact that certain people, you killed my son, therefore I'm going to kill yours, that kind of thing. That wasn't something prompted by the Maesters. The only real possibility here is that it got prompted by the Dance of the Dragons happened because the one faction wanted a particular heir and another faction wanted a different heir, and the people who were trying to break with the named heir were what we call the Greens, who were led by the Hightowers. Now, Alicent Hightower who had been married to the king and had had children by the king, but it was the child by the previous marriage that was the named heir. That was the issue, that the Greens basically tried to change the line of succession because they wanted to. Now, was that because the Maesters prompted them to? They were high towers, the hand of the king at the time, and the mother of the heir they were trying to push forward were high towers, but we don't see much evidence there that it was the Maesters who were prompting this. Indeed, if anything, the Maesters we see come out quite poorly out of all of this. A lot of the Maesters were locked up, were killed, and all the rest of it. They were not clearly during this pulling the strings. So I don't think so, is the short answer. Possibly, but I don't think so. Berus Aurelius saying potential video Weapons of a Song of Ice and Fire with Matt Easton of Schola Gladiatoria. Would be epic. I don't know that channel, but I will have a look at it. Question: are the Maesters more fire aligned or ice? I don't think that either is the answer. I think they would see themselves as being independent from all of this. The point of ice and fire thematically is going back to Robert Frost's poem. George R. R. Martin quotes it a lot. That both ice and fire are forces that could destroy humanity, could destroy the world. And it is for the people in the middle to try and figure out how do we prevent these two forces from destroying us. And the Maesters, I suspect, would see themselves as being in that middle group. They're not on the side of ice. They're not on the side of fire. They're on the side of humanity, people in the middle trying to sort stuff out. Question from... I might be caught up on questions in the chat. Excellent. Question from my patrons then. Henning J. Hi, Robert. I think it's accurate to say that the Citadel and the Maesters have a monopoly on knowledge and education and certain skills like healing. Effectively, they keep Westeros from developing further over time in many ways. Is this just about preservation of power and influence, or is there some other long-term objective? I think it's basically it's a human thing. We've seen this through human history, and George R. R. Martin bases a lot of this on medieval Europe, and there you had you've got the Faith of the Seven play a lot of the role in this, but certainly the monasteries and all the rest of it, they had the knowledge. They were the people who would knew how to do the reading and the writing, and they were the people who gathered the bits of information, and that was their power. And it is a basic human thing to try and keep hold of your own power if you think that somebody else might be able to take it away from you. If on a very individual basis, if you are in Westeros earning your money by being the person who can write wills and who can write legal contracts and all the rest of it, what you do not want is other people being able to do that. On a basic human level, you want to be the person that they go, oh, we need to get that guy in so that you can charge them money, so that you can pay the rent. That is about keeping power to yourself, keeping knowledge to yourself. So it's not for the betterment of humanity. It is for the betterment of the people who have that knowledge and understanding. So that is what is going on. They are trying to keep their own power in order to keep things going along as they are, because frankly at that moment they're doing all right and they don't need that. Yes, it would help humanity hugely if everybody could read and write, if lots more people knew how to do the healing, if people understood the histories of the world, but it helps the Citadel and the Maesters if they are the only people who can do those things. Shetland Apache, how do Maesters rationalize something like the Faceless Men? Are they deniers of magic, or do they just want to suppress it? They're not deniers of magic. They wish to say that magic existed, but it does not so much nowadays. Now, I think there is an element of about stuff that's going on out there in the wider world. So the Faceless Men, to most people, just them, are not magical. They're just very good assassins. That is what you would think. Most of the people in the world who are aware of them just think that they're very good assassins who have some kind of death cult thing going on. They don't know anything about the magic going on there. But in terms of the wider point, the Maesters, I think, probably accept and understand that there are magic users out there. There are things going on, but they tend to ignore it. In Westeros as a whole, at the start of A Song of Ice and Fire, there's not much magic going on, to the extent that all of the characters in book one that we're introduced to as being knowledgeable and wise and all the rest of it, people like Maester Luwin or Tyrion, they mock the idea of there being magical things going on. Tyrion, when he's given the idea that there might be the others, he talks about Grummikins and Snarks or whatever it is. He just thinks, it's just nonsense. Magic doesn't happen anymore. And that is the prevailing wisdom in the world, and that is because the Maesters have put that worldview across into the wise and the powerful in Westeros, and because there isn't much magic happening in Westeros at that time. The Red Priests, not really in Westeros. The ones that are there are people like Thoros of Myr, who at that time doesn't show any particular magical prowess. The Faith of the Seven, generally speaking, doesn't show much by way of magical prowess. The Children of the Forest have pretty much disappeared. So what magic is there out there? Not much. So that's how they rationalize it, because there just isn't much going on. Anime lover Nicole, did I miss your super chat? Possibly. Sorry. Let me just quickly scroll up and see whether I can find it. Oh, yeah, I've got it now. Apologies. Sorry, I did miss it. Where do you think Maesters like Luwin, Pycelle, Marwyn, or others like Crescent come from, since they don't have last names anymore, and where they come from? I mean, the short answer is I don't know, and I think that's okay to not know. The Pycelle seems to have some kind of link across with the Lannisters. He seems to be loyal to them in some way. That implies that perhaps he's got a history going on there. He comes from the Lannisters. Maybe he's a Lannister bastard or something like that. So there are a few of them that we can sort of see a link across that suggests why they might be doing what they're doing. But in the main, I would personally suggest that actually for most Maesters, they don't go there and then suddenly get embroiled in some great conspiracy and then have to do certain things. They actually do what it says on the tin. They give up their previous life and all of their previous links. They spend a long time studying in the Citadel, and let's not forget they if you go there, as most Maesters do when they're quite young, and then spend all of their formative years there, and then get sent out afterwards, actually where they come from doesn't matter that much. It's just a few times when you get slightly older people who go in there, or people who go in and then come back out again. That's when it matters more. So for most maesters, and I think you talked about Maester Lewin, I think for him, he was put there as he's a good character, but he was a stereotypical maester. I think that is what he's trying to show us, what the maesters are like, and that means that it doesn't actually matter where he's from, which is not great for the conspiracy theorists amongst us, because we love to have this idea that this person comes from there, that person comes from there, therefore they've got an affiliation to this. For the majority of maesters, wherever they come from doesn't matter at all, I would personally argue. And apologies for not spotting the super chat as it was going through. I think that's me caught up. Archiokia, does magic only work if you believe in it? No, but most of the time, yes. The rules of magic are not 100% clear in the world of Ice and Fire. However, sacrifice is almost always required in some way. There is always a cost to magic. And intentionality also seems to be quite an important thing. There are always times when you can point at something and say, well, those things didn't happen there. There are exceptions to the rules. And Thoros bringing Beric back the first time is a clear exception to that, because Thoros wasn't intending to do that, and there was no immediate sacrifice going on there. But as a general rule, yes, intentionality does seem to be. Magic doesn't just happen. Definitely there seems to need to be something. Archiokia is saying, is becoming a maester costly? Interesting question. We're not told so much about the prices of these things, but it's more, it would appear it's more about the cost of staying there. That's what we get. We get a couple of chapters. So we get Sam, who arrives down there. He's there for most of a chapter. We also get the Pate chapter at the beginning, and the clues we seem to get, because we've not had huge amounts in the Citadel, but the clues we seem to get are that actually the problem is the cost of staying there and doing the studying. They don't sort of charge a huge amount up front. You have to pay a certain huge amount in order to access the learning. It's the cost of staying there. So is it expensive? Ish. It's not prohibitive. People can head on down there, but and try and study, but not everyone can. Question, let's go across. Actually, you know what, I've not done my normal plugs for things halfway through, just things that are coming on in the channel. So things to look forward to. Lord of the Rings videos will keep coming. I had a little bit, as you know, I had a little bit of a break, so that's why there haven't been so many videos this week. Lord of the Rings videos are still coming. I've got one coming up hopefully in the next few days, which is going to be looking at when Eowyn killed the Witch King, and it's like, no man can kill me, but I am no man. Was he really just killed on a technicality? I'm going to try and look into that one. And also a question that I can remember bugged me the first time when I was reading The Hobbit, which was, why did Gandalf choose Bilbo? Why? Out of everyone, why did Gandalf suddenly pitch up on Bilbo's doorstep and say, let's go on an adventure? There are reasons, and so that's coming up. As for Song of Ice and Fire content, I have got a video which is going to be my new-ish perspective on Daenerys and her character arc, which it probably will veer into the rather controversial area of whether she's going to be the Mad Queen and all the rest of it. So as you know, I don't tend to go down these kind of like, is a person mad? That's very kind of derivative. That's not how George R. R. Martin writes. But if you want to hear my perspective on what her character arc is likely to be going forward into the next 2 books, then that video is going to come out, as I say, probably in a week or so's time. So keep an eye out for that. Patrons, thank you. I always try and thank you every single time I do a live stream. If you want to get access to any of the audio that I do extra stuff. A while ago, I did the audio narrations from the pre-release chapters of The Winds of Winter. If you're interested in that kind of thing or just want to support the channel, then please do check out my Patreon page. There is a link down in the description. Okay, let's get back to some questions about the Maesters. Actually, first of all, Kraken Tacos. Thank you so much for the super chat. One of my wonderful moderators. Moderators, thank you. I have the best moderators in the world. So if you are watching this live, please do say a big thank you to the moderators. Question saying, would I comment on the metal of the Maesters links? Who's making these Valyrian links? I think I read the links were painted lead. So the links on the chain, so Maesters around their neck, they wear a chain. Each subject that they master, then they get a new link, and each time it's in a different metal. Now, who is forging? And the one for the higher mysteries from magic effectively is a Valyrian steel link, which obviously is incredibly rare. Now, who is actually doing that? We're not told the exact details, but the clear implication is that there is a forge in the citadel, in the depths of the citadel, that makes these chains. Or makes the links in the chain. Now, is the Valyrian steel one painted lead? I personally suspect not. I think they actually are the things that they're supposed to be. I think the implication of this is that the citadel, we know that Maesters went across to Valyria before the Doom. The clear implication is that the citadel brought back the information on how to at least reforge, if not forge for the first time, Valyrian steel. So if they were just reforging it, then over the centuries they will have had to have access to a big amount of Valyrian steel. Yes, nowadays it might only be 1 in 100 Maesters who gets this Valyrian steel link, but still we're told that having a sword out of Valyrian steel is beyond the dreams of most houses. So having a link in a chain, even if it's only a small one, would be hugely valuable, and the Maesters would have to have a huge amount of this in order to be forging all of these. So yeah, there's something there we do not understand. Either they escaped from the Doom of Valyria with a huge amount of Valyrian steel that they can then forge into these links in the chains, or they learned the secret of forging it in the first place, which may well be the kind of thing that Sam could discover, or, as you say, it's all a sham and it's not really Valyrian steel, it's just painted lead. So those are the options you get. My personal preference is for the idea that that they do have the secrets to how to forge Valyrian steel, but just are not sharing it. Mara Lee, thank you so much again for the super sticker. Thank you. That's very kind of you. Elise saying, do you think Rhaegar and Lyanna's marriage record is in the possession of the Maesters? Does that mean that the Maesters know Jon's true parentage? Yeah, so in the books, on the show, This was there just as a sort of a random record, not a formal record, but just sort of like a passing reference. If Rhaegar and Lyanna were married, then they were probably, even if they were married in front of a heart tree, in order for it to be sort of an official marriage as far as Rhaegar was concerned, I think they probably would have a septon there, and the septon probably would record it somewhere. How the Maesters then get involved is another matter entirely. So I think the answer is possibly, but if this is going to come out as a truth that they did get married, then the only place where that is going to come out is from the Citadel, because Howland Reed may well know it, but what's the word of one person? If it's going to convince people that Jon, and this is the whole point of this for the story, if it's going to convince people that Jon is indeed a legitimate Targaryen heir, then that has to have some kind of substantive evidence behind it, and that's the kind of thing that it will be in the Citadel if it exists. Kelly Johnson saying, are Hightowers Proto-Valyrians, a magical family? We don't know the history of the Hightowers, but they were definitely very, very, very old. So they predate the Starks, for example. They seem to have come across quite early on. The bit of Westeros which we have the earliest hints that humans came across is where Old Town is now. That seems to be an ancient trading center, it would appear, between humans and Children of the Forest. Now, does this mean that they are Proto-Valyrians? Well, they came from Essos at some point. And they were there thousands of years before the Valyrians existed. Does that make them Proto-Valyrians? Well, possibly. And I know there is lots of theories about particularly House Dane as well, and there are lots of similarities between, if you look at House Dane and House Hightower and where their home base is, an island in an estuary and all the rest of it. The link across to sort of Far East and the Empire of the Dawn and things like that, it's possible, and there are thematic suggestions that may well be the case, but we do not have the evidence, and to be honest, I don't think that it's going to have a huge amount of influence on the story going forward, whether or not the Hightowers came from a culture that a few millennia later produced the Valyrians. I don't think that's going to be an important plot point. Argiokia, thank you again, saying, if magic requires belief and maesters hate magic, is there a way of combating magic, teaching that it is not real? Yes, partly, but that's more about teaching that it is not real now. And if they teach people that, and this is quite an insightful question, if they're teaching people that magic does not exist or does not exist now, then yes, that gets rid of the intentionality. It will stop people trying to learn magic, which means that it will stop people doing magic, and so yes, that will advance their aim. It is where we're at, and that's probably, but for the intervention of everything that happened, probably would have been what happened with Bran. Maester Lewin was humbly suggesting that Bran might want to come down to the Citadel and learn to be a Maester. Even though Bran was interested in magic, Maester Lewin was like, no, that's not real. You should perhaps learn how to be a Maester instead. Question from Shetland Apache, thank you very much. Do the Maesters associate with any religion? They were around before the Faith of the Seven came, I believe. I've never heard of a faithful Maester. No, they don't associate with any particular religion, although they are very much the kind of the rationalists. This is where they fit into this world. They are the sort of the Enlightenment kind of people who are there trying to learn and understand how the world works, rather than base it on a faith. So they are not based on a particular faith. However, the link is there across to the Faith of the Seven because they both have links into House Hightower. Because we've talked about this a few times, the way I would put it is that House Hightower are the center of this, and then we've got the Maesters and we've got the Faith, and they both have a relationship up with House Hightower, but they don't particularly have a relationship with each other than proximity and all the rest of it. So that seems to be the way it is working. I think that's me caught up in the chat now. Let's go to some questions from my patrons. Eric Fogg saying, do we have any sense of whether the Citadel has always hoarded knowledge this way, or has this tendency developed as part of a larger institutional decay? For instance, was there ever been an effort to provide basic education to more of the population in any areas? What portion of Westeros is illiterate? It seems like even members of War Council, certain lords, and most knights can't read. So the proportion of Westeros that is illiterate is the vast majority, 99%. It's just the lords and ladies who can read, and not all of them. In terms of whether the Citadel have ever tried to expand the knowledge of the people, the evidence suggests not. We had no particular story of a time when they set up schools. In fact, you won't really get the concept of schools in Westeros, in the Song of Ice and Fire. The idea of universities or anything like that just does not exist. So the clear implication is no, they have never tried to disseminate this knowledge out to the wider world. They're very happy keeping it in for themselves. So no effort to provide basic education. And have they always hoarded knowledge? It does seem that is the case. I think when it started, probably not. But as you called it, institutional decay seemed to set in quite early and has stayed there for a very long time. Kelly Johnson, are HITWRS remnants of the Great Emperor of the Dawn preserving knowledge? I'm not entirely sure what you're saying there. Are the High Towers preserving knowledge from the Great Emperor of the Dawn? I don't think that seems to be what's going on there. No, I mean, there might be some knowledge that's handed down, but the whole point of their establishment was that the High Towers didn't have knowledge, and they went out to get the people who did have knowledge and brought them in, and then they gave them a home. So the short answer, I think, is that no, they don't seem to be based on it there. Fodder for foreshadowing, thank you so much, saying Septon Bath seems to be more Maester than Septon. Why do we consider him such a good source of information when the fandom distrusts both institutions? We consider him a good source of information, I think, for a few reasons. Firstly, because we're told to by things like Fire and Blood and the World of Ice and Fire and all the rest of it, is that they basically, the narrative tells us that he was a very knowledgeable person. Secondly, because he seems to have answers on stuff, when we see him in action. He thinks about things, and the answers he gives seem to make sense. But at a slightly more structural level, I don't think, and this is the whole idea behind Septon Bath, was that he wasn't from the infrastructure of the faith or the Maesters. He came on a donkey to go to King's Landing. That he wasn't there sent by the faith as being the new High Septon or anything like that. It was that Jaehaerys spotted him, liked what he was about, and then promoted him. So he came up through the system of the court rather than through the system of either the faith or the Maesters. So he is independent, and the things that he seems to be right on and intrigued by are things that seem as if they're going to be important for the plot, like dragons, for example. And the moment that you start getting somebody who is established as being an insightful person, and then you say, but his book on this really important subject was destroyed because it was considered to be heresy, immediately makes us as a fandom go, oh, hang on, what was in that book? We need to know what was in that book. So that is why we kind of like buy into it, I think. Uncooked, how much power and influence do Maesters have in Westeros in comparison to the Crown or Faith? Yeah, I think it's this varies over time. They sometimes do, and they sometimes do have huge amounts of power, and then sometimes they have less. The Crown, when, say, Aegon the Conqueror was in control, they were undoubtedly the most important, because they had a dragon, and Aegon proactively went around and visited different places, and so whatever he said went, and the faith had to adapt, and the Maesters had to adapt to that power. Then in terms of after the dragons had gone, the faith, their power, in fact, regardless of whether the dragons were there, the faith's power waxed and waned according to how much they were allowed to follow their own faith, really. When they were just being institutional as a faith, accepting of the Targaryens, then they actually didn't have huge amounts of power. But when they were railing against the Targaryens, that's when suddenly they had the mass of people on their side. We talked about the storming of the Dragon Pit earlier. If they, that's just showing that if the people suddenly get behind this with religious zeal, they can then charge up and do huge amounts simply through people power. The Maesters, out of the three, probably stayed the most constant. Their power and influence was less obvious all the way through, because being in charge of communications and being in charge of teaching and training, these are very influential, but they're not exactly the kinds of things that always are very showy. Questions from my patrons. Lady Eternal saying, good time zone, Robert. Hi. I hope you're feeling rested and recharged. I am, thank you very much. I was first introduced to the Maester Conspiracy theories during your live streams with Geek Chat 1, Secrets of the Citadel, and Azora Hype after Game of Thrones Season 7. Wow, that is a long time ago, but I'm glad you enjoyed them. I have seen several different versions since then. Is the elimination of the dragons and suppression of magic the entire point of the machinations? Or is that only a small part of a larger conspiracy to control the Westerosi noble class that predates Aegon's invasion? Some theories make the Maesters to be the Illuminati of Westeros, and others focus solely on their secret campaign against the Targaryens. I'd love your clarification. So the Maesters predate the Targaryens by a long way, so they have been there for a long time. The Maesters have been involved in the noble houses of Westeros from well before the Targaryens. So no, they're not just there on some conspiracy, anti-Targaryen conspiracy. They are on a long-term. I personally don't think this is like written down anywhere as this is what we're about and everybody has to follow this. But on a long-term goal, it's about rationality. It's about things that we can control and understand and all the rest of it. And magic is not a part of that world. And Maester Marwyn is absolutely right. So is it a conspiracy? I think conspiracy is actually the wrong word, to be honest. I think that there are times when perhaps they were moving behind the scenes to do stuff. I do have my own tinfoil about their involvement. I don't think it's tinfoil, actually. I did a video on it ages ago, if you're interested, on their involvement in the Doom of Valyria. That fits in perfectly with their worldview. And I think it makes entire sense that they got rid of the dragons when they could. But I don't think it's just about anti-dragon stuff. I think it's magic as a whole. I think that they're very happy to be teaching people against this kind of stuff. We see it all over the place with Maester Cresson. We see it with Maester Lewin. Neither of them are there seemingly thinking that they're having to push this. It's them thinking this is just the right thing to do. It's not good and right for there to be magic out there. This is going to threaten and potentially damage humanity. That seems to be the mindset. So I think conspiracy is the wrong way of saying it. This is their worldview that permeates all the way through everything that they're doing. And sometimes that means that they will be undertaking things that advance their own agenda in a more dramatic way, let's say, like getting rid of the dragons. Kelly Johnson, did the Children of the Forest help turn back Valyrians at Battle Isle? We don't know. So Battle Isle is the island in Old Town that the High Tower is built on. It is called Battle Isle, which implies there was a battle there at some point. We do not know what that battle was. Did the Children of the Forest help turn back the Valyrians there? It's possible, but we simply do not know. Question. Greet Weirwood. Do I think that what do I think Maester Kennet was doing digging up the barrows in the north? I think just trying to get information and knowledge. That's digging up barrows is just that's what scientists do. We call them archaeologists now. That's just what they do. Question from Jenny Bird, saying, my question is regarding your thoughts on the future for the Maesters. Despite his personal reservations, I think Sam would make quite a good Maester. I agree. However, it doesn't look like he will even have time to forge a single link in his chain before Euron will show up to wreak havoc. And pretty soon after, everyone's attention will be turned to the others. Do you think Sam will ever become a Maester? Will the Maesters exist in the end? I think Sam... I think you're right. I don't think that he will have time to be forging a whole Maester's chain. Probably not even a link. So I think that he will not become a Maester at that time. If the Citadel crashes and burns, which I think is entirely possible, then the question is what happens. That doesn't mean that the Maesters are all gone at that point. Yes, a lot of them will, but the Maesters will still be existing around Westeros. So the institution will survive as a way of retaining and disseminating knowledge. I suspect that we're not going to get the 20 years later chapter telling us exactly what happens afterwards, but I think that Sam will not become a Maester. He may be an honorary Maester in the way that we saw at the end of the show, in some way that keeps him and rewards him and all the rest of it. Sam is the one character I suspect is going to have the happiest and simplest and most idealistic of endings out of all of the characters. So I think that good things will happen to him, and the institution of the Maesters will continue in some shape or form. Luna Cascade saying, "Hi Robert, can you address how and why the Maesters replaced the Pyromancers or the alchemists in the power struggle with the crown? And what is the Maesters' ultimate plan as it relates to their influences with the noble houses of Westeros?" So in terms of the Pyromancers, I think I've answered the stuff about their plans with noble houses already, so I won't pick up on that one, but I'll definitely pick up on the first bit with the Pyromancers. Now, the Pyromancers and the Maesters, this is something that we hear about as being, there was a long struggle between the two of them, who's the more important and powerful and all the rest of it. The Pyromancers, the Alchemists Guilds, who are based in King's Landing, they claim to be ancient, which seems in the world of A Song of Ice and Fire means they have to be hundreds, if not thousands of years old. Otherwise, saying you're ancient doesn't really mean much, because there are so many ancient things. Now, in terms of the struggle for power with the Maesters, I've always found this quite an intriguing thing, because we're told that that's the case, but again, rereading Fire and Blood, it is notable that the Pyromancers aren't mentioned. They get like an occasional random mention here and there, but it's not. The Maesters are always involved in what's going on. Individual Maesters all over the place. Pyromancers, not really at all. Now, my take on that is that the Pyromancers, before the Targaryens arrived, perhaps they were of equal power and knowledge to the Maesters. We do not know. But when the Targaryens arrived, the Targaryens had dragons. They didn't really need to have Pyromancers. They had fire whenever they wanted it. That wasn't an issue for them. So they will, I suspect, become more important in the second half of the Targaryen rule, when they do not have the dragons. And we see hints of this in the things that we know. So the Mad King had his Pyromancers, and they were very central to him, to the extent that actually he made one of them Hand of the King at the very end. So they were very important there. Aegon V had Pyromancers at Summerhall when he was doing his attempts to hatch some dragons. They seem to have gained in power and influence in those latter years of the Targaryen rule, when they did not have dragons. So that seems to have been the to and fro. And then after, when Robert Baratheon came in, suddenly they lost power. And it was the Maesters came back in again. So that seems to have been the case. We don't know the exact balance of power before the Targaryens came in, but the implication is that they were a powerful guild. Perhaps not in the same way with the Maesters in every single noble house, but perhaps they were slightly more specialist and respected in that speciality. Rambling Jack, is there any textual evidence that the Citadel is responsible for the dance and other conflicts? Tinfoil, welcome to, intriguing either way. Textual evidence that they were responsible for the dance, no, is the short answer. We do not have there. You can get lots of theories on this, and we can go tinfoil on this, but there's nothing that we have that says, and the Maesters decided it would be really good if that doesn't seem to be there. And the Maesters that we see at that time do not seem to be acting in concert. They seem to be suggesting all sorts of things all the time, changing their minds. It would be an incredibly detailed conspiracy if it were the case that they were managing the Dance of the Dragons, because it would be a how to create chaos by advising this and then this and then this. But the kings, queens, princes, noble people, and all the rest of it who were responsible for it do not always seem to take Maester's advice anyway. So there's not much of a hint. The only hint, as I say, is the fact that it was the Hightowers who prompted all of this. If the Hightowers hadn't been there, if Alicent Hightower hadn't been there, then and hadn't taken the role that she did, then there probably wouldn't be a Dance of the Dragons, because frankly there was an heir, and they decided that they didn't want that heir. They wanted somebody else to inherit. So if anything, I would say that this is more about a clash of personalities between Daemon Targaryen and House Hightower. That seems to have been, if anything, the biggest issue that was causing it. Now, obviously, the Hightowers have links across with the Maesters, but there's no specific textual evidence there. If you want tinfoil, you can apply tinfoil wherever you wish and say, yes, the Hightowers caused the Dance of the Dragons, and the Hightowers are in concert with the Maesters. That's your link if you want it. Kelly Johnson, how will the Maesters strike against Euron? I think it's more a matter of the Euron striking against the Maesters, to be honest. And it's a matter of whether and how they can defend themselves. I don't think they're going to do a good job. I think all the clues are that Euron is going to be burning down Old Town, including the library. Okay, so question from Eric Fogg just is following up on the question about Pyromancers, saying, do we have any sense of what the wisdoms can actually do beyond wildfire and supposedly transmuting metal? They claim vast knowledge, but do they have similar capabilities in ravenry, healing, etc., like the Citadel? In other words, are they actually rivals with the Maesters over influence and power? I think the answer is they are specialists, whereas the Maesters are generalists. Now, if you are wanting something to do with fire, you would definitely go to the Pyromancers. They claim to be able to transmute metal. There's not much evidence of that, to be honest. If you could transmute metal, then you would have whatever money you want. You can just keep on creating gold. So there's no hint that they have got that much money. They've got a very nice townhouse, guild house, as it were, but other than that, there's no real hint that they've got that. Do they have other knowledge? Perhaps they do, but they don't show it. It's all about what they can do with fire, and that, as I say, that's a specialism, and they know more about that than the Maesters do. There's no doubt at all. But big picture, healing, the stars, maths, commerce. The Maesters know more about all of those things than the Pyromancers do. Sydney Rose, will the Citadel burn like Alexandria? Yeah, that's clearly what George R. R. Martin is hinting at. Old Town being like Alexandria with this big library, with this big lighthouse. The hints are that it will burn, as the legend of Alexandria goes. So it's sad, but that does seem to be what's going to happen. Henry Fairbairn saying, do you know why disgraced maesters like Qyburn are not more closely controlled by the Citadel after their expulsion from the Order? Such maesters can manipulate the dark arts and therefore could be quite powerful, but the Citadel just casts them aside. Perhaps Qyburn is just unusually talented, or Cersei doesn't care about his reputation, so uses him anyway. Yeah, so this appears to be how they operate is by being quite relaxed about people who are part trained or fully trained and just go away. They seem to just shrug their shoulders and move on. There are lots of people who go earn one or two or a few links of Maester's chain and then just head off. Oberyn Martell did that. He did 5 or 6 links of his chain and then learnt a lot and then just headed off. This seems to be quite a regular occurrence. There are lots of people who are scribes around Westeros who learned what they learned in the Citadel, realized that they weren't going to actually make it as a maester, and then just headed off with whatever knowledge they got and earned a living that way. People like Qyburn, yeah, they seem to just, I mean, they don't have an army at their disposal, so they're not there hunting down people who they think are potentially undermining what they're about. But yeah, they seem to not mind too much because they've got a control of the top of society. I think that the idea that they behind this is that someone like Qyburn, yes, he rises back up to power, but actually when we find him to start with, he's there with a sellsword company. He's not in any particularly influential place. He's effectively just there being their hired healer. That's all it is, and the Maesters were probably absolutely fine with that. That's okay. People will see that he learned what he learned from the Citadel, and if they want to learn how to do it, they have to go to the Citadel. I suspect actually their biggest problem would be if he suddenly set up the University of Qyburn and tried to teach other people what he had learned from the Citadel. I think that's the kind of thing that they would probably clamp down on. But him just going out and using the knowledge that he's gained, they don't seem to be that bothered about that kind of thing. Catherine Furseth saying, do we know anything about who performed the tasks, responsibilities, and roles of the Maesters before they came into being? Were the Citadel and the Order of Maesters created early after the Andal invasion? What did the first men do for sage advice? The first men before that, they didn't have Maesters. So they had their own, everyone had their own wise person or whatever. So before the Maesters, there were hundreds of petty kings. That's where we are at. And as the number of petty kings reduced, the power and influence and spread of the Maesters increased. So it's more a matter of they gained their power as the Westeros developed over the centuries. It wasn't. There was a time before the Maesters, but you referenced the Andals there. When the Andal invasion happened, the Maesters were already well established. But at that point, they were established thousands of years before the Andals came. Lady Eternal, as far as the Maester Conspiracy is concerned, I wonder how many in the Order are fully aware of what their marching orders mean and why. Do you think that their agenda is only confined to the Archmaesters, with the Maesters being indoctrinated to act in certain ways without really knowing why? Yes, I think this is exactly how it is. The policy of the Citadel is probably not a thing that gets taught to random maesters all over the place. It's just the sort of the conclave, the council that of archmaesters who decide on these things. Now, as I say, I don't think, when we talk about the Maester Conspiracy, I don't think this is a millennia-long conspiracy. I think that this is a thing which is just passed on from generation to generation as this is what we are trying to achieve here at a meta level, not just gaining new knowledge. But to a great extent, it is just, they are just following what they always want, which is to amass knowledge and sit in their ivory towers and write erudite books about stuff. That's what they're about. So are the maesters like Lewin or Crescent part of some conspiracy? No, I don't think so. I think that you talk about them being indoctrinated and sent out. I think that's pretty much what it is. I think that Lewin gets his understanding of what the situation is with magic from the Citadel, and then he goes out with that. And you only pass your tests in order to get your links of your chain when you come around to the understandings that effectively the Archmaester of that wants you to have. So it's like imagine having a professor who's got a very clear view on whatever subject it is, and you're only going to get good marks and pass marks if you, to a degree, agree with what that professor says. That is the kind of the way that I imagine this. So the Citadel doesn't, I suspect, have this doctrine written somewhere of this is what we're trying to do in order to manipulate the continent. It's just that there's this institutionalized way of doing things. Another question from Lady Eternal. To what extent do you think the Citadel allows for outsiders like Oberyn Martell to come and study if they have no intention of becoming a maester? There are obviously secrets being kept there that they wouldn't want outsiders to know, and someone like Oberyn isn't likely to be easily controlled into silence if he found them. So as I say, I think that they seem very relaxed about the idea of people coming in, learning a bit of knowledge, and then going away again. As long as they're not setting up their own schools, rivals to the Citadel. But that doesn't mean that they're imparting all of the knowledge that is there. There is we read of locked vaults down below the Citadel, below the library. So you can learn from the library, you can learn from the maesters, but only some people are allowed to go down and learn the deeper mysteries in the locked vaults. And that, I would suggest, is for people like the Archmaesters. Only the people who they know are in the club and aren't going to sort of break all the rules, they are the only people who get that deeper knowledge. Most people who are studying stuff, Oberyn came and studied poisons, for example. Now, okay, he knows about poisons and then he goes away. Do the maesters care about that? Not hugely, because from their perspective, this is good PR. If people know that Oberyn Martell knows lots about poisons, they'll say, how does he know so much about poisons? Because he went to the Citadel. And so actually it just adds to the aura of what the Citadel can teach you. If you want to learn about it, you go there. They will only start getting concerned if there's a rival set up, if Oberyn set up a school, which he was never going to do. Question from Zakalok saying, hello, Robert. Hope you enjoyed your holidays. Thank you. I did. And thank you for helping us go through these rough times. You're very welcome. My question concerns the Maesters and the Hightower. They are obviously related, but how could you explain that the Maesters are currently letting Leighton Hightower do some huge magic stuff with his daughter without interfering? If the Maesters were so anti-magic, don't you think they would have done something about it? Moreover, I just had a cool theory. What if the Hightowers are trying to wake a dragon imprisoned in the ancient black-fused stone base of the tower? It would fit Dany's vision about a great stone beast taking wing from a smoking tower. I'll let the chat deal with the theory. My personal take is no. I think that they do not have a dragon egg, and I don't think that they are trying to hatch a dragon. But they are doing magic. Leighton Hightower, Lord Hightower, is, it would appear, doing magic at the top of the tower. You say, why are the Maesters allowing it? I don't think the Maesters have control over the Hightowers. If anything, it's the other way around. So I think, given the fact that actually nothing much has come from it as yet, then I don't think that anyone's all that bothered. And I think that they are probably very pragmatic, to the extent that if it helps protect them, then they're probably going to be okay with it. So yes, they are anti-magic. And yes, I think that they'll be aware that the Hightowers are doing things up there. But I think that it's pragmatism coming into play there, and a lack of power. They're not exactly going to storm the high tower and charge their way all the way up to the top to challenge him. That's not how they've ever done business, to be honest. The high towers protect them, so they're happy to be sort of vaguely looking the other way. Bride of Fire saying, hi again, Robert. Do you think all Maesters are part of the conspiracy or only the high-ups? Also, what do you think that Lewin, someone we know who forged a Valyrian steel link, probably knew Marwyn was able to get assigned to Winterfell after the previous Maester disappeared? Yeah, so I think I've covered the all Maesters part of this angle. In terms of Lewin, so he was based originally at Riverrun with House Tully. Then he went up with Catelyn after she'd had Robb. He went up with her to Winterfell. Now, this seems to have been her wanting, as she just given birth, she wanted the Maester to be going with her. This was clearly very important. This was the Stark heir that she was carrying, so she wanted to make sure that all was okay. And he went up there, and the Maester who had been in Winterfell, as you say, disappeared. We just don't know what happened. Now, Ned Stark, the character dynamic that was going on at that point was that Ned Stark arrived back with Jon Snow as a baby, and he's pretending that this is his bastard child. And so his new wife arrives with the child that she's got with Ned, to find that Ned has got another baby, and says, I've had this child with somebody else. I'm not going to tell you who, and I'm going to install him here in Winterfell and look after him and make him like a part of the family. She feels humiliated by this, understandably. He's cheated on her literally within, given the age of the children, from what he says, he has cheated on her literally within days or weeks of them marrying. This is, and then doesn't try and hush it up, doesn't even admit to who this was with, just installs this child. Ned's mode is just try and appease Cat. We know what Cat was like. We can imagine how she reacted at the time. He says, okay, you can have a sept. You can have a scepter up here to teach our children in the ways of the faith of the Seven, as well as the old gods. And yes, you can keep your maester up here as well. He's bending over backwards to do everything for her at this point, and that seems to be what the dynamic was. I think I've got a question on this later, but there's quite a fluid arrangement in terms of who decides what maester goes where. If a lord specifically says, I'm having this maester, then that happens, because they're paying for them, and so they get to decide which maester they have. And if Ned Stark says, I'm having Lewin, then Lewin it is. So I don't think it's a matter of the Citadel saying, you're going there because we want you to be going there. Twisted, thank you so much, saying, hi Rob, just wanted to say thank you for all the streams and videos. Love to watch the videos while I'm going to sleep. Thank you so much. And a lot of people say that they watch them as they're going to sleep, which I've decided to take as a compliment, that I send people to sleep every night, which is lovely. Lady Pushkin saying, hi Robert, do you believe there actually is a conspiracy? If they are anti-magic, why do they use glass candles? Also, do you find it strange that when it was written in a book at the Citadel that no one else knows about Rhaegar and Elya's annulment? So Rhaegar and Elya's annulment, if it is known, will almost certainly be known not necessarily by the Citadel, but by the faith. George R. R. Martin had back when he was answering questions from fans on stuff and doing Q&As online, someone asked him about Sansa and Tyrion's marriage and the potential for that to be annulled. And his answer was yes, but that would have to be done by the High Septon. Now, if the marriage between the daughter of a lord and the son of a lord has to be done by the High Septon, then certainly the heir to the kingdom's marriage would also have to go through the High Septon. So I think that is where the knowledge will be, really, rather than with the maesters. That's on the show they had, a random maester who kept a random diary of things. That seems to be where they went, and that always seemed a little bit crowbarred in. As far as I'm concerned, this was people will have been aware of this if it was what happened, but I don't think we necessarily have to believe. The Targaryens believed in polygamy, so, and the Martells definitely believe in polyamorous relationships. So I don't think we necessarily have to believe that what happened was a divorce and then a marriage. I think that there are plenty of other possibilities of what was going on there. But do the maesters use the glass candles? They use them, most of them at least, use them just as an example that magic doesn't exist. Mara Lee, Jack and Hagar is at the Citadel. Fans believe he may be looking for the book on how to kill dragons. Is this what the Maesters Conspiracy is all about, to end magic? And if so, how will Jaqen help to do this if he does find that book? So Jaqen Hagar is at the Citadel. He is there disguised as Pate. Sam has met him at the end of the last book, so that's where we're at. The question, of course, is what is Jaqen there for? The hints are that he's after this book. If you want to know my full logic on why he's there, then I did a long time ago, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, I did a series of videos about the Faceless Men and why they might be trying to kill dragons. And I don't think it's what a lot of people seem to think. It's about slavery and hating Valyrians and all the rest of it. That doesn't really seem to me. The Targaryens have been around for 400 years now. They would have, if they were desperate to get rid of them, then they would have done that a long time ago. No, I think this is a lot more to do with the faith of the Faceless Men. And we don't often think about it as that. We often think about maybe they've got a slightly culty thing going on there, but no, they have got statements of faith, and one of which is all men must die. And we treat this as being like a cool catchphrase, but it's not just a cool catchphrase. This is actually what they believe. This is fundamental to who they are. Everyone must die. And the moment that you accept that that is what they actually believe, not just a cool thing that they say, the moment you accept that this is what they actively believe, is that everyone must die eventually, you have to accept the idea that people not dying when they should die is heresy to them. This is absolutely against everything that they believe. All men must die. They set themselves up as a place where people can go off and accept death, drink the waters there from their pool. They set themselves up as assassins so that they can kill people who just, it's part of what they're about, is the ending life, because death is an important part of what it is. Everyone must die at some stage. That is what they believe. The increasing evidence in Westeros in particular is that this is not happening anymore. This is not the way of the world anymore. The others are resurrecting whites north of the wall. Down south we get Qyburn creating the zombie mountain. We get people like Beric Dondarrion coming back. We get Lady Stoneheart. We'll have Jon again and again and again all over the place. We get people who are not dying when they should die. People are not staying dead. This is heresy. All of this is heresy to the Faceless Men. So what do they want to do? They want to stop it. And that's a number of different elements to this. But why dragons? Because when dragons came back into this world, that's when magic suddenly bloomed and blossomed. The link is made many, many times. If they get rid of the dragons, then they're going to get rid of a huge amount of this people not dying when they should die. So that, I think, at its heart, is why the Faceless Men want eventually to be killing dragons, to be getting rid of the magic. And this, yes, will line up with what the Maesters want. But I don't think that the Faceless Men necessarily are going to be sort of like coming to some deals. Jaqen is clearly there on a secret mission, not one to be treating with the Maesters. Sidney McCall, do you think that the Maester's dismissal of magic is more cognitive dissonance than is calculated suppression and revision of magic? And how do you think that the Maesters will react to the arrival of Euron Greyjoy and his magic-infused squad and possible dragon? yes, there's a degree of cognitive dissonance going on there. I think that it would have been interesting to see how, say, Maester Lewin would have reacted to obvious signs of magic going on. Some maesters are open-minded, but a lot of them aren't. But there is definitely a degree of, calculated suppression of magic is probably an overstatement, but there's a putting out there of a worldview about magic not being, first of all, not being good, but also not existing anymore. So that is what is going on. How will they react to the arrival of Euron Greyjoy? I think it's going to just appear like that in their faces. That seems to be how Euron is operating. There's going to be a huge sea battle. Yes, there will probably be lots of demonstrations of what are very magical things, Krakens appearing and all the rest of it. But and possibly a dragon, as you say. I think that the Maesters will probably just be keeping themselves to themselves. They're not the people who are doing the defending. That's what House Hightower's there for. So I think that they will not deny the fact that there are things going on, but perhaps they might deny that all of it is magic. Some of it, Krakens are real things that are there. Nobody's denying that they exist. They get drawn by blood in the water. So if Euron summons Krakens, then that's just because there was a big sea battle. That's the kind of thing I think that they could be doing. But generally speaking, when Euron attacks Old Town, I think this is going to be a big surprise attack. I don't think this is going to be something which is they're waiting for and then pondering, the magical implications of something. Mara Lee asking what I think the Maester's role will be in the war with the others, or with Dany's dragons. I think that they will stay out of this. I think that the main role here. Kraken Tacos, thank you so much. Have a good time with your friends. The Maesters are not going to get involved in the role with the others, in the war with the others. I think that they are, their main role is to be supplying the information that, say, Sam is going to be collecting, and Jack and Hagar is going to be collecting, that will come in importance. So it will be despite them that this information gets out that will prove to be important. But the fact it was there is their role. So they're not proactively going to be fighting the others. They're not proactively going to be fighting the dragons, but people will be escaping with the knowledge of how to do both of those things. Mara Lee, how will the Maesters react to Bran if Bran should become king over Westeros and Greenseer magic, or the Weirwood network? Do you see Sam Tarly eventually becoming a Maester, and perhaps even head over the Maesters and change how they view magic and Greenseers and so on? So I don't think we're going to see this, how everything pans out at the very end. I know we all want to, but I don't think we're going to see how it all pans out. How will they deal with Bran, as they would any king? So the Maesters adapted to the idea that there was a king who rode a dragon after dealing for many centuries with kings who didn't ride dragons. So I think that they would just adapt as they do to a king who has magical powers. The likelihood is that the Citadel will be gutted or destroyed in some way. So as an establishment, they're not going to be as powerful. We're going to be talking about individual maesters and all the rest of it, rather than what the Citadel is wanting to do. But will Sam have a role in changing how the Maesters operate. I see, if anything, Sam becoming like Septon Bath, a lot more like that. So he's, and as I say, I don't think we're going to see this, but the person who is trusted by the king, and therefore is sort of promoted because of that, rather than because the Citadel is wanting that person to be there. So that seems to be what Sam's most likely to be about. Will he change how the Maesters view magic and all the rest of it? Quite possibly the Maesters will have to have a reset and all the rest of it, particularly if they've lost a lot of their books. Just a couple more questions now from my patrons. So now is the time, if you have got any questions, to drop them into the chat. I'll try and pick up as many of them as I can. Before I go, Shannon I. Adams saying, it seems that there are multiple Maester conspiracies. The one that influenced the doom of Valyria, the one that caused Summerhall, the one that Barbie Dustin alludes to, and so on. While it's possible each of these is a single spoke in the wheel of a greater conspiracy, it would be improbable that all Maesters are privy to all these machinations. Which specific Maesters do you think most likely to be part of these conspiracies, both in the current time current to A Song of Ice and Fire and the past? Well, I don't think I want to name names on this one. I think that there, yes, we get those the Southron ambitions thing sounds quite possible. If the Maesters, having got rid of the dragons, which sounds entirely likely, the next step is to get rid of the Targaryens, because as long as you have Targaryens in power, then the potential for dragony stuff is always there. So how are you going to get Targaryens out of power? Well, you build up alliances against them. They no longer have dragons to protect themselves, and so the way to do that probably is to start the people who aren't in the central core down in the south, start getting alliances between the northern parts of the Seven Kingdoms. So yes, that one makes sense, that you try and tie in the Starks with all of this. That, if anything, could be something which is directed from the Citadel centrally. In terms of what was going on with Summerhall, I've thought about Summerhall a lot and come to lots of different conclusions, but my general conclusion is that I don't think this was the Maesters doing something. I think that it's entirely possible this was Bloodraven. It's my default answer on a lot of things, but I have got reasons for that. Again, I've done a video on that if you're interested. So it's entirely possible that Bloodraven was involved. The Maesters, no. I think with things like that, you have to ask who benefits from this. And the upshot of this was that Aegon V was killed, and therefore you have to ask, if he goes and then Jaehaerys takes over and Aerys after him, what sort of shift is going to be? The shift is from a king who, yes, they're starting to get a little bit obsessed by fire and dragons and all the rest of it, but they are very much trying to intermarry the Targaryens with the kingdom, bind the kingdom together and all the rest of it. And you're going to replace that with Targaryens who are intermarrying with themselves, because there's a prophecy that's where the line of the Prince that was promised comes from. So in all of that, who benefits? I think the person who benefits is Bloodraven and Bloodraven's agenda, for reasons I've set out in my videos. I think that the Maesters do not benefit. I don't think that the Faith of the Seven benefit from it either. I think that both of them would have actually been very happy if Aegon V had stayed in power, but just not managed to hatch any dragons. That seems to be what their win would have been, and therefore they do not feature very highly in my list of potential suspects when it comes to Summerhall. Reflective rambling for Isaac. Thank you so much. I love it when people pick up on questions for other people. Do you think Qyburn's disgrace and outcast from the Citadel has any bearing on their understanding of the others? And does he have a future role to play beyond his creation of Robert Strong? So Qyburn has an understanding of the universe, of how life and death works in Planetos that actually seems right. Yes, he's evil and a bad guy and all the rest of it, but he seems to have figured out something here. And that is this idea that something lingers. When someone dies, and he uses the example, he's talking to Jamie, I think it is, and he says, if you go into a room and you see a chair and there's an indentation on the chair and there's the hint of perfume in the air, then you know that beforehand a woman with that perfume was sitting in that chair, and that's because something of her lingers. The impression of her smell, and that, he says, is like humans when they die. Something lingers in this world. And that seems to be exactly right from what we see with Beric Dondarrion. He dies, but something of him lingers. The same with Catelyn Stark. But the longer they're gone, the more often this happens, the less and less of them remains. The amount that lingers, it diminishes. He seems to have understood this concept, which seems to be a correct understanding of what is going on. He then has applied this, it would appear, to the creation of Robert Strong. Now, has this changed the Citadel's understanding of things? I suspect probably not. He was investigating things that they thought he shouldn't have been, to do with death and undeath and all the rest of it. So they just think that's anathema and chucked him out. So that seems to be what's going on there. In terms of whether he is now going to have a bigger role going forward, the creation of Robert Strong is, in my view, it's a prototype. This was a proof of concept as far as Qyburn is concerned. He's still getting bodies and live people sent down to his laboratories, so he's carrying on doing whatever he's been doing. He's keeping on with his research. We shouldn't expect this to end with just one undead person in Cersei's army, so to speak. I think he's going to create a lot. So expect an army of the dead is probably an overstatement, but certainly more like Robert Strong will be arriving at some point soon. So I think that is his role going forward. And then if, as I suspect, Cersei will link up with Euron, then we suddenly get this idea of Euron, with all of the crazy things that Euron's up to, also having an undead army, is craziness. So that seems to be where we're going with all of that. Berus Aurelius, is there a possibility some of the Archmaesters and the High Towers are actually working with Euron, similar to Saruman and the Blue Wizards? Thanks. I don't think so. So the Archmaesters seem to be, as a bunch, against or that in favor of order and rationality and understanding the world around them, and not magic. And that's the exact opposite of Euron. The only Archmaester who seems anywhere close to that is Maester Marwyn, who is now heading off to try and find Daenerys. So I don't think in any way that the Maesters are going to be working with Euron. He seems to be completely against what they are about. The High Towers are a slightly different prospect, in that, yes, they do seem to dabble in magic, but at the same time, all the hints we've got is that the High Towers are mobilizing to defend themselves against Euron. So we get the some rumors of the Ironborn coming in and sort of scouting out Old Town, making plans for how they might attack it, it would appear, and the High Towers responded to that by capturing them and by improving their defenses. This is all on direction from Leighton Hightower himself. So everything we've seen is that they are actually doing exactly what we would expect them to do, which is trying to defend themselves, the city, the Maesters, and all the rest of it from Euron, and that definitely seems to be what's going on. So no, I don't think either, personally, I don't think either are going to be siding with them. Daisy, so Robert's yawning reminds me it's nearly 2 a.m. Yeah, it's nearly 1 a.m. here, which is hence the yawning. I apologize for any yawning on screen. Sasak, last question from my patrons, saying, hey Robert, just wanted to add a more light-hearted question. Do you have a favorite Maester in the series? There are many named, and most we have very little information on. Mine is Maester Eggs Mule. If I had to pick a human Maester, I would say Crescent, because that prologue is heartbreaking. Yeah, I don't think I can beat Maester Eggs Mule. Egg from the Duncan Egg stories calls his mule Maester, which is quite amusing given the fact that he's, or ironic, I think, really, given the fact that he is getting his instruction on life and the world from wandering around and meeting people and experiencing things, rather than having a Maester instruct him as he would probably otherwise as a prince of the realm. So this is a nod from him and George R. R. Martin to the fact that he is not being trained by the Maesters, so to speak. In terms of a favorite Maester, I can't get past Maester Lewin. I think he's fantastic. I love him as a character. Yes, he denies magic and all the rest of it, but he just seems a really caring, wise person who is wrong about some stuff, but he's willing to be. Yeah, I like him a lot as a character. Let's have a quick look at the chat. I will do pick up on a couple of things before we go. Just having a quick flick through so if I can find Conan Song saying, Robert, do you think Qyburn can be a Dornish spy for Doran? He seems awfully sus helping the Lannisters after they slaughtered his village. I don't think so. I know lots of people want Qyburn to be secretly something else and therefore having his own agenda. I think Qyburn is just looking out for himself. That seems to be what works there. He's a social climber. He sees an opportunity with Jaime to try and attaches himself to Jaime, and then he sees an opportunity with Cersei, attaches himself to her. He's climbing up and climbing up and climbing up to get to the point where he can carry on his studies. We know the backstory, that what he was chucked out for doing, and we know that he wouldn't be able to carry on those studies just hanging around in Harrenhal. So he is getting himself back to a position where he can carry on his studies. He is very much a Maester. As far as I can see, that is what it is. That seems to be what is driving him. He is ingratiating himself with the powers that be that will allow him to do the thing that he actually wants to do, which is carry on his studies of life and death. That is what it is. And I can't, personally, I don't think it would add anything to his character for him to be anything more than that, to be a spy for someone else or anything like that. Okay, but I think that's a really good way to... and I've got a question, actually. Joel Faulkner saying, do the Maesters have any broader goals in terms of seeking power, or are they just aiming to push their relevance and the scientific agenda? I think that's what it is, to be honest. I think we should see them as being the equivalent of monks in medieval Europe. To say, did they have an agenda? Well, yes, obviously they were pursuing knowledge, and they were keeping knowledge and all the rest of it. Does that make it a conspiracy? I mean, you could argue yes, but that's probably adding too much intentionality for individual monks. Most of them were just doing their own thing, and that seems to be what is happening here. And Carla Way, thank you so much, saying, no question, just sending a contribution to fund the 2021 in Deep Geek Mods Bonds calendar. Well, Mods, what do you think about that? Let's see where we go with that. Thank you so much. Okay, I think with that, I am going to wrap this one up. If you enjoy these kinds of live streams, long discussions on certain subjects, then there will be a link appearing somewhere up here if you're watching this back later. If you'd like to either get access to some of the things I do just for my patrons, audio narrations and all the rest of it, or you just want to support this channel, get a bit of early information about what I'm up to, then there's going to be a link appearing somewhere around here. Okay, I will be back next week. Haven't decided yet what the subject is. Somebody suggested swords, which sounds like quite a fun one. Maybe we'll do that, or Valyrian steel or something like that. But it will be same time next week. And until then, take care, everyone, and I will see you again soon.